Leon Drake sat at the bar counter of the Obsidian Grotto, his calloused fingers tracing the rim of a chipped glass, each swirl of amber liquid reflecting the neon lights that danced across Nova Epsilon's sky. He was a man who had once scaled the greatest heights of danger and fame, back when his name evoked both fear and grudging respect among the stars. But that was before the regrets, before the betrayals, before he had folded in on himself and tried to vanish from memory. Now, he lived in the farthest corner of the city, a place where the shimmering spires of wealth hovered overhead like mocking beacons, reminding him that he was forever beneath them. He downed the remainder of his drink and let the burning warmth spread across his chest. His ex-bounty hunter reflexes registered the presence of watchers in the gloom, a pair of corporate men, wearing tailored suits with edges that glowed faintly in the dark. They might have recognized him, or perhaps they were just bored employees, drifting through the Undercity for a cheap thrill. Leon was too tired to care. A bartender approached, a graceful droid with slender limbs, pale artificial skin, and eyes that flashed silver. "Would you like another, Mr. Drake?" it asked, voice calm, each syllable clipped just enough to sound faintly polite yet distant. Leon was about to nod when something flashed across the bar's overhead display. A scrolling advertisement in swirling neon letters. Exquisite. Rare. For the discerning palate, Celestial Taste proudly presents the universe's finest culinary delights. He paused, an uneasy sensation curling in his gut. The ad concluded with an invitation, a 5-star restaurant named Luminar Ascendant, perched at the top of the city's spire. It was reserved only for Nova Epsilon's elite, those who spent fortunes on amusements that few dared to imagine. The memory of an old contact telling him about exotic dishes that certain wealthy patrons enjoyed bubbled to the surface of his mind. Rumors had circulated for years, the kind that made even hardened men like Leon cringe. He had dismissed them as vile rumors then. But now, that invitation glowed like a beacon for the unscrupulous. He turned away from the display, offered a curt nod to the bartender droid, and asked for another whiskey. The droid complied without question, sliding a fresh glass toward him, which he lifted to his lips. Then, abruptly, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He tensed, instincts flaring. "Mr. Drake?" A voice, smooth yet laced with an iron undertone, spoke from behind him. Leon swiveled on his stool, meeting the sharp eyes of a middle-aged man whose expression blended formality with calculation. "Who's asking?" Leon said, voice low, posture ready despite his earlier attempts at feigned indifference. The man's lips curved into a polite, almost condescending smile. "You look like a fellow who appreciates finer tastes," he said, jerking his head at the overhead display. "Luminar Ascendant is offering a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Thought I'd extend an invitation to a man of your stature." Leon smirked. "I'm not in the habit of frequenting spires that are 100 floors above my pay grade. And yet, your name has graced certain lists before. If you desire, we can arrange for a complimentary tasting," the man insisted, discreetly sliding a sleek card onto the bar. It glimmered with polished edges, the stylized Celestial Consortium logo etched into its surface. "Tonight's special is rumored to be exceptional. In fact, it's a delicacy that's quite literally out of this world." Leon studied the card for a moment, mind churning. He recognized the name Celestial Consortium. That corporate juggernaut's tendrils snaked through trade, entertainment, and apparently gastronomy. He thought back to the hushed rumors, alien slaves, captive creatures. The whispers had always been that they peddled unimaginable indulgences. In his old life, as a bounty hunter, he had glimpsed the underside of galaxy-wide trade, but even he had never found evidence to pin down the consortium's darkest secrets. Perhaps that was about to change. Against his better judgment, he pocketed the invitation. When he looked up, the man who offered it was gone, vanished into the swirl of neon haze and half-drunk bar patrons. Leon set down his glass with a soft clink. "Guess I'm skipping dessert here," he muttered, pressing a few worn credits onto the counter. He stood, shoulders tense, half expecting some trap. Yet no one followed him as he strode out the door, stepping into the chaotic tangle of undercity traffic, where bright speeders wove past overhead. Moments later, he stepped into a turbo lift at the base of Nova Epsilon's central spire. The green LED panel recognized the invitation card's code. With a faint shudder, the lift shot upward, rocketing past thousands of windows, each level a world unto itself. He watched the city lights blur, felt that old stirring inside him, anticipation, dread, excitement. Even after all these years, the possibility of appending some vile secret gave him a reason to keep breathing. The door hissed open onto a luxuriously lit corridor with soft, silken drapes that shimmered in subdued gold. Here, Synthetic carpets cushioned every footstep, and the air smelled faintly of exotic spices. Polished sculptures lined the walls, each depicting fluid shapes reminiscent of cosmic phenomena. The hush was broken only by the gentle hum of hidden fans. At the far end, a hostess greeted him with a demure bow. She wore an elegant gown, and her hair was styled in symmetrical coils that reflected the refined taste of Nova Epsilon's wealthy class. "Welcome to Luminar Ascendant, honored guest. Your table is ready. May I escort you?" Leon nodded, wordless, pressing his lips together. She led him through a labyrinth of private dining booths, each separated by holographic curtains that displayed scenes of far-off galaxies, star clusters, and swirling nebulas. Soft music played, an orchestral melody that wove serenity around the diners. Soon they arrived at a booth that appeared enclosed in starlight. Translucent panels displayed drifting constellations, giving the impression that he hovered in the silent void of space. Plush seating awaited him, and an attendant stepped forward to help him settle in, but he waved the attendant away. He sat, back straight, scanning the elegantly arranged table, crystal glassware, silver cutlery with filigree designs, and a single white plate that seemed to glow faintly under the overhead lights. "Your first course will arrive shortly," the hostess said. "We hope your evening is a transcendent experience." Leon tried to relax, though tension coiled in his gut. He had not fully planned what to do next. He only knew that something dreadful lurked behind these lavish trappings. The rumors whispered that the Celestial Consortium illegally trafficked alien beings, some of them rumored to possess powers, others rumored to be served on the plates of the unscrupulous. The question was whether tonight's delicacy would confirm the darkest speculation. He didn't have to wait long. After a few minutes of contemplative silence, in which he watched the holographic stars shift and swirl, an ornate trolley glided through the shimmering curtain. Pushing it was a tall man dressed in impeccably tailored formal attire. On top of the trolley lay a domed silver platter. Leon's pulse thumped heavily. The tall man bowed deeply. "Honored guest, your main course is here," he intoned, voice hushed, as though unveiling a sacred treasure. With careful, practiced movements, he lifted the dome. Beneath it lay not an entree of some rare beast or exotic plant, but a trembling figure with emerald green skin, slender limbs, and wide, terrified eyes. She appeared almost human, except for the slight glow of her irises and the faint patterns across her cheeks. She wore a filmy white cloth that covered little more than what modesty required, and a silver collar around her neck glowed with an unearthly light. Leon's breath caught in his throat. The figure on the plate trembled under the overhead illumination, her arms pulled in tight, knees drawn close, eyes darting around in horror. "No," Leon murmured, voice shaking despite himself. He had suspected atrocities, but to see it laid out so blatantly made his stomach lurch. The man in formal attire offered another bow. "This is Sera, an empathic being from the Seraphine Nebula. We assure you, her flavors are beyond compare. Her species exudes certain hormonal essences that heighten the culinary experience for those who dare partake. We stand by Celestial Consortium's promise of ultimate indulgence." Leon's eyes flicked from the trembling alien girl to the man's dispassionate face. He felt an old fury stirring within him, the same fury that used to ignite his reflexes on bounty-hunting missions. He clenched a fist under the table, fighting the urge to smash the man's smug face. He forced a calm expression, though his heart raced. "And how exactly is one supposed to partake in this dish?" he asked, voice cold. An indulgent smile curved on the man's lips. "An injection ensures that the subject experiences minimal pain. We have quite a few methods on the menu, from a refined draining procedure to a marinade infusion." He said it all as though discussing a piece of carefully butchered livestock. "Perhaps you prefer a less direct experience, sir? We can have a specialized chef do the honors, and you may savor the prepared slices at your leisure." Leon's mind whirled in revulsion. He locked eyes with the alien girl. He could see 1,000 emotions swirling in those luminous irises: terror, confusion, sorrow. Empathy, indeed, for he sensed she could feel his own swirl of rage and guilt. A faint wave of pleading emanated from her. It resonated in him like a silent cry, although she had not made a single sound. He had to act now. The entire scenario was unthinkable. The old him, the one who had once stood for justice in a universe rife with moral decay, was roaring to life, demanding that he fight. Let's sample her privately," Leon said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. "Bring her to my suite or somewhere more intimate. If we're to do this, I want privacy." The server hesitated, but then nodded with practiced etiquette. Very well, sir. We have private tasting chambers. He pressed a subtle switch on the trolley, causing the girl's collar to emit a faint hum. She winced and shuddered. Please follow me, the man said, turning to guide the trolley. Leon rose, trying to maintain a neutral facade. Inside, adrenaline coursed through his veins. Everything felt sharp, heightened by the pounding of his heart. There must be cameras everywhere, he thought, scanning for potential ways out. For all he knew, an entire squad of security drones stood ready behind hidden doors. But there was no going back now. He had to save this girl, or die trying. They moved through winding corridors until they reached a chamber whose walls were draped with velvet curtains. In the center stood a minimalistic steel table and discreet trays bearing surgical instruments. The hair on the back of Leon's neck stood up. This was it, the place where unspeakable acts were performed under the guise of gastronomic pleasure. The tall man pressed another switch on the trolley, and the collar around Sera's neck loosened slightly, though it continued to glow. She appeared too terrified to move, though her eyes darted toward Leon. Once again, he felt that faint wave of desperation emanating from her, as if she was silently begging for deliverance. Leon forced a calm nod at the server. "Leave us," he demanded, keeping his voice as smooth as possible. "I've the particular ritual I'd like to conduct alone." The server hesitated. "But protocol typically requires." Leon's expression darkened, letting a bit of his old, dangerous aura seep through. "Do you know who I am?" he asked softly, stepping closer. His stance radiated the coiled tension of a former bounty hunter. "Would you like me to mention your name to the consortium as interfering with my private tasting?" The man stiffened, eyes flicking over Leon's features. Something in Leon's gaze, perhaps the lethal promise in it, made him step back. "Apologies, sir. We live to serve. I will be just outside the door should you require any assistance." Bowing stiffly, he retreated. The chamber door slid shut behind him with a soft hiss. Leon turned immediately, crossing to the trembling girl. He reached for the collar, feeling its faint crackle of energy. "Sera," he whispered, "I won't hurt you." She looked up at him, her eyes overflowing with tears of relief, though her body remained taut with fear. He sensed the swirl of her empathic abilities, like a soft wave pressing at his mind, reading his intent. Her lips parted, and a trembling voice emerged, speaking a dialect he recognized from the outer fringes. "Why you won't," she stammered, the words broken but understandable. Leon shook his head firmly. "I'm going to get you out of here." The collar's mechanism was advanced. He didn't have the right tools, but he'd been around enough black market tech to attempt an override. He pulled a small multi-tool from a hidden pocket within his jacket, flicking through attachments. Sera's breathing grew erratic as the collar began to spark. Leon cursed under his breath, muttering, "Stay still. This might hurt for a second." The collar hissed, and a pulse of energy zipped through Sera's fragile body. She gasped. Leon twisted a final time, popped a locking latch, and the device snapped open with a whine. Carefully, he lifted it away from her slender neck. The glow faded. Sera stared at him with wide, glistening eyes, a swirl of unspeakable gratitude pouring off her in empathic waves. Leon gently helped her off the trolley, noting the slight bruises on her wrists and ankles. "Can you walk?" he asked softly. She nodded, trembling, barely steady on her feet. "We need to move quickly." He glanced around the chamber. There was no immediate exit besides the door they had come through. He could guess there were security cameras in every corridor. If they tried to escape openly, an alarm would be triggered, and a small army of corporate guards or droids would descend upon them. But Leon had not survived decades as a bounty hunter by being timid. He recalled architectural schematics in his mind. Nova Epsilon's spire often included maintenance shafts or emergency ladders. If he could find one, perhaps he and Sera could slip away. He gently grasped her hand. "Stay close," he whispered. "We'll get out of this alive." They stepped to the door, which slid open as Leon pretended to wave the server inside. The tall man stood a few paces away, fiddling with something on a handheld console. Upon seeing Leon and Sera stepping out, collar-free, he gaped in alarm. "What are you?" he gasped, fumbling for an alert button. Leon's fist lashed out in a flash. The man crumpled, unconscious. An alarm began to whine softly from the console, triggered by the server's sudden distress. Leon grabbed the device, slammed it on the floor, shattering it. But the damage was done. Lights in the corridor turned red, and a mechanical voice announced an intruder alert. So much for a subtle escape. Leon tightened his grip on Sera's hand. "Run," he hissed. They sprinted down the corridor, the plush carpeting absorbing the sound of their footfalls. A corner led to a side hallway, but it was a dead end. Another corridor led to a sealed door with an electronic lock. Behind them, the pounding of footsteps and the droning hum of security drones drew closer. "Sera, stay behind me," Leon said, scanning the lock. It required a palm signature or a code. He rummaged in his jacket, retrieving a compact hacking device he had picked up in the Undercity for entirely different reasons. He slapped it onto the panel. The device whirred, sparks flashing. The overhead alarm screeched. "There they are," a voice barked from behind. 3 armed security officers in black uniforms barreled into the corridor, weapons raised. Leon cursed, pulling Sera behind him. He had no gun. He had come unarmed, expecting only to gather intel. But necessity bred invention. He grabbed a nearby decorative vase, a gaudy relic perched on a pedestal, and hurled it at the first guard. It shattered into a shower of fragments that caught the guards off guard. Leon lunged forward, twisting the first guard's weapon aside while delivering a savage elbow strike. The second guard tried to aim, but Sera screamed, a raw, psychic plea that swept the corridor like a burst of telepathic energy. All 3 guards flinched, momentarily overwhelmed by a surge of fear that mirrored Sera's own terror. Leon capitalized on their hesitation, striking again. 2 guards went down in a tangle of limbs, and the third staggered, disoriented, giving Leon enough time to slam him against the wall, rendering him unconscious. The lock beeped behind them. Green lights lit up. Leon spun, flung open the door, and pulled Sera through. They emerged into a stark white corridor, lined with industrial piping, a maintenance tunnel, by the look of it. Distant machine noises thrummed through the vents. Leon hurried forward, Sera clinging to him. He spotted a hatch with a ladder leading downward. That might be their way out, if they could avoid pursuit. The entire spire would be on high alert, which meant they had precious little time to vanish. They descended the ladder, each rung echoing with the clang of metal. Sera's breath came in shallow gasps, her empathic waves roiling in confusion, fear, and tentative hope. Leon felt a pang of sympathy, remembering those he had failed to save in his old line of work. He silently vowed he wouldn't fail this time. Eventually, they reached a sublevel corridor. Leon pried open another hatch, stepping into a dimly lit thoroughfare that seemed deserted. Overhead, pipes dripped condensation, forming puddles on the floor. Crates and mechanical parts lay scattered, hinting at some seldom-used service area. He paused, letting Sera catch her breath. "We're not safe yet," he warned, voice low, though a flicker of relief threaded his words. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and she leaned against him, trembling. Her wide eyes reflected the faint glow of an overhead lamp. Thank you," she whispered, her voice quavering. They were going to, she couldn't finish. But Leon could fill in the blanks well enough. He gave a tight nod. "We'll get you off this planet, away from these devils." Then he paused. Your species, I've never seen them before. Are there others like you?" Her gaze slid downward. "Not many. Most taken. We are empathic. Some can soothe. Some can incite emotions. Some can glean memories." She glanced at him with something like apology. "I can feel the guilt you carry, the pain you've experienced." "I'm sorry," she murmured, tears forming anew, as though she couldn't help feeling his burdens. Leon exhaled slowly, feeling the old scars of regret pressing in on his psyche, as though Sera's empathy uncovered them. "There's no time for apologies," he said gently. "We need a plan." Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Leon tensed, reaching for anything he could use as a weapon. There was nowhere to hide except behind some crates. He motioned for Sera to crouch low, and he pressed his back against the crates, heart pounding. A pair of corporate guards, clad in black tactical gear, approached from the far end of the corridor. They carried rifles with flickering readouts, scanning the environment. "They've got to be around here somewhere," one guard muttered. Leon took a silent breath, body coiled to spring into action. Then Sera touched his arm, sending a subtle wave of calm through him. He felt his pulse steadied by her empathic influence. It wasn't forced, more like gentle assistance. He nodded in thanks. The guards came closer. Leon signaled Sera to remain still. He carefully peeked around the edge of the crate. The first guard was stepping within arm's reach, weapon aimed. Leon saw his opening. He lunged up, grabbed the barrel, and yanked, pulling the guard off balance. The rifle discharged with a deafening crack, sending a bolt into the metal ceiling. Sparks showered down. The second guard spun around, but Sera let out another empathic cry, a sharper wave that slammed into their emotional centers, flooding them with an intense burst of disorientation. It wasn't quite a mental attack, more like a violent surge of empathy, forcibly echoing the terror they had inflicted on others. The guard staggered, dropping his weapon, clutching his head with a ragged groan. Leon struck quickly, disarming the first guard with a fluid motion and knocking him out with a well-placed blow. The second guard fumbled in confusion, and Leon finished him off with a swift kick. The corridor fell silent except for the hum of overhead lights and Sera's rapid breathing. He picked up one of the rifles, checked its energy level, and slung it over his shoulder. "We need to move," he said. "They'll only send more." Sera nodded, wiping away tears. Her posture straightened, determined. Despite the horror she had endured, a resilient spark shone in her eyes. It reminded Leon of how the oppressed often harbored unimaginable strength. They continued down the corridor, moving quickly yet quietly. At intervals, they passed flickering signs that indicated sublevel numbers. Their goal was to reach ground level, or at least a shuttle bay. But each step felt like trespassing deeper into a labyrinth controlled by the Celestial Consortium. At last, they came upon a cargo elevator. Its doors were partially open, revealing an empty shaft. The control panel was smashed, perhaps as a security measure during the lockdown. Leon grimaced. They'd have to find another way. A clang echoed from somewhere behind them. They whirled around to see a heavy metal door slide open. A squad of armed guards poured through, led by a figure in a regal black uniform with silver piping. Tall and broad-shouldered, the leader had the kind of face that radiated cold authority. Leon raised his stolen rifle, firing a warning shot. The bolt seared across the corridor. The guards dove for cover, returning fire with a barrage of sizzling energy bolts that set crates ablaze and ricocheted off metal surfaces in a dazzling, lethal light show. Leon cursed, dragging Sera behind an overturned container. They were pinned down. Sera trembled, letting out whimpers as the empathic recoil from so much aggression tore at her senses. She pressed her hands to her temples, eyes squeezed shut. Leon clenched his jaw, scanning for an escape route. "Surrender, Leon Drake," boomed the leader's voice. "We know who you are. The Celestial Consortium does not look kindly on thieves of its property." Leon snarled, peering over the crate. "Your property? She's a living being, you sick monster." He fired another shot, forcing two guards to duck. Then he pulled back, checking the rifle's energy meter. It was half depleted. Not good. They could keep him pinned indefinitely. He risked a glance at Sera, who was still overwhelmed. A pang of guilt struck him. This was no place for her. But he couldn't allow them to recapture her. He needed a diversion. Something big enough to distract or cripple the guards so they could slip away. Peering around the corner, he spotted overhead conduits that fed from a large pressurized tank. Perhaps it carried coolant or some volatile substance. If he could rupture it. Leon exhaled, steadied his rifle, and fired at the overhead piping. Sparks flew. The pipe ruptured with a hissing roar, releasing a plume of freezing vapor that rushed across the corridor. The guards shouted in surprise as the cloud enveloped them, sending shards of crystallized mist swirling through the air. The gloom and cold hammered them in seconds. Leon seized Sera's arm and bolted. They sprinted through the corridor, their footsteps echoing. Behind them, the squad flailed in the freezing cloud, half-blinded. Leon spotted a side tunnel and ducked into it, guiding Sera as swiftly as he could. After several panicked turns, they found a disused workshop. Rusted mechanical shells of service droids lined the walls, and a single vent near the ceiling drew in stale air from above. Leon crouched behind a battered console, rifle aimed at the entrance, chest heaving. Sera slumped against a wall, eyes downcast. "I can't keep using my powers," she murmured. "It hurts." She pressed her palms over her face. Leon stepped closer and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I know," he whispered. "Just hold on. We'll get through this." He studied the workshop, searching for a vantage point or maybe a hidden exit. The vent overhead was too small to crawl through, at least for him. But maybe Sera could fit, if it led somewhere safe. The thought of separating weighed heavily on him. Suddenly, the battered console beeped, a faint static buzz emanating from an ancient comm system. Leon froze. Then a voice crackled through the speaker. "Leon Drake, can you hear me?" Leon's heart lurched. That voice sounded oddly refined, with a forced politeness that rankled. "Who's asking?" he hissed, pressing a button. "I am Chancellor Arcturus of the Celestial Consortium," the voice said. "I have been informed of your theft, but we can discuss this like civilized beings. Return our property, hand over the empath, and no further harm will come to you." Leon's lips curled in disgust. Civilized? Don't make me laugh. He glanced at Sera, who peered up at him with pleading eyes. "You were going to serve her for dinner." "All is fair in business," Arcturus replied with a patronizing sigh. "But if you deliver her back, we'll pay you handsomely. Enough to wipe away your past transgressions. You can reclaim your old life, Drake. Leave these undercity slums behind." Leon felt a surge of old bitterness. He might have once been tempted by such an offer, back when wealth and renown mattered to him. But the atrocities he had witnessed tonight made it clear there was no going back to that hollow existence. "She's not property," he spat into the console. "Go to hell." Arcturus sighed again. "Then you leave us no choice, Mr. Drake. We will hunt you down. And when we do, you will beg for mercy." The comm connection crackled and went dead. Leon slammed his fist on the console in frustration. Sera touched his shoulder gently, her empathy radiating a mixture of gratitude and fear. "We can't outrun them forever," she said softly. "The spire belongs to them. The entire city might as well." Leon nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to hit them where it hurts, so they're forced to let us go." His mind churned. The Celestial Consortium thrived on secrecy. Nobody in the mainstream believed the rumors of their abhorrent practices. If Leon could expose them, the subsequent uproar might save Sera and others like her. And maybe, just maybe, it could spark a revolution in this corrupt city. "We need evidence," he muttered. "Something undeniable. Something that reveals how they harvest and traffic sentient beings." He thought of the restaurant's hidden records, the logs of illegal shipments. They had to exist somewhere in the building. Sera, still trembling, nodded resolutely. "I can help. If there is a place where the memories remain, I can read them. I can show them to others." Leon frowned. "Read them?" She shook her head, searching for the right words. "My empathy extends to deeper channels. If I touched the device that recorded these atrocities, I might sense echoes of the events or glean the truths hidden in data. It's not perfect, but it might be enough." Leon had heard of certain empathic species who could imprint themselves onto digital mediums, but it sounded like a risky plan. Time was short, though. A clang from the corridor told him they had pursuers close by. He made up his mind. Let's find their data core. They'd store their records in the secure part of the spire. Leon glanced around the workshop. "But first, we need a disguise." Rummaging through crates, he found a tattered maintenance uniform, a cap, and a set of older ID badges used by service staff. Sera's shimmering green skin would stand out, but maybe he could hide her under the uniform or wrap her in a cloak. He improvised, tearing fabric to fashion a hood that draped over her features. When they stepped back into the corridor, the alarm lights still pulsed red, but there were fewer guards in this deserted sublevel. They moved swiftly, taking side passages and occasionally ducking into alcoves to avoid patrols. The tension pressed in on them with every step, Sera's empathic worry mingling with Leon's grim determination. Finally, they reached a polished set of doors labeled with the Celestial Consortium's emblem. Two armed guards stood watch, scanning passers-by. Leon frowned, pressing his back to the wall, rifling for a plan. The secure data core would be inside. They had no time for subtle infiltration. He shared a look with Sera, who nodded, bracing herself. Summoning her courage, she focused her empathic aura. Leon felt a ripple of calm wash through the air. One guard blinked in confusion, lowering his weapon as a wave of sudden contentment overcame him. The other guard, less susceptible, frowned, but Leon was already in motion. He stepped around the corner, rifle raised. The second guard recovered enough to shout, but Leon fired a stun bolt, dropping him. Sera's empathic wave kept the first guard docile, eyes half-lidded. and Leon efficiently disarmed him, delivering a precise strike to knock him unconscious. They pried open the doors, revealing a room bathed in pale blue light. Sleek consoles and databanks lined the walls, and a single large hollow display hovered in the center, projecting lines of code. The hum of complex servers filled the air with a subtle vibration. Leon locked the door behind them, then rushed to the main console. If we pull enough data about their culinary acquisitions and how they smuggled Sera's people, we can blow the lid off this entire operation. Sera gazed at the swirling data streams. "Let me try," she said softly. She placed a trembling hand on a console, closed her eyes, and inhaled. Her empathic senses reached out, touching the digital interface. Leon watched as the console's lights flickered, responding to an unseen presence. Images danced across Sera's mind. Rows of stasis chambers containing various alien species, high-level deals with the elites of Nova Epsilon, hush-money transactions, body parts labeled for exotic cuisine, encryption logs that spoke of entire shipments. The data was monstrous, horrifying. She let out a small cry, tears trickling down her cheeks. Leon grit his teeth. He stepped to a side panel, working quickly to copy the data onto a portable drive. Sera's lips parted, breath ragged, as she delved deeper, gleaning the unscrupulous deals orchestrated by Chancellor Arcturus. At last, the data transfer beeped completed. Footsteps thundered in the corridor outside. The door shook under heavy blows. They had found them. Leon's pulse quickened. With a snarl, he grabbed the portable drive and stuffed it into a hidden pocket. Sera collapsed to one knee, overwhelmed by the torrent of dark knowledge. Leon dropped beside her. "We got what we need," he said, voice urgent but gentle. "Now we must go." Her eyes fluttered open, filled with anguish. "They have so many captives," she whispered. "I saw images of entire shipments. Not just my people, but others, taken from across the galaxy." Leon's jaw tightened. "We'll free them. But first, we have to survive." A deafening boom signaled the door's partial breach. Smoke billowed in. Leon helped Sera to her feet and glanced around. There was another door opposite the one they had entered, presumably leading deeper into the secure sector. With the front door compromised, that might be their only path. They raced across the data chamber, ducking behind consoles as blasts of laser fire tore through the steel plating. One bolt grazed Leon's shoulder, searing pain through his nerves, but he pressed on. Using the last of his rifle's charge, he returned fire, forcing the guards to take cover behind the ruined door. He and Sera slipped through the secondary exit, emerging into a corridor that radiated a cold, sterile atmosphere. The walls here were thicker, more fortified. "We must be close to a high-security area," Leon muttered. "Maybe a lab or detention block." A soft moan drifted from further down the corridor. Exchanging a glance with Sera, Leon crept forward. They found a row of sealed cells, each containing battered alien prisoners, some of them unconscious, others awake but hopeless. The overhead lights glowed a harsh white, revealing creatures of diverse shapes, some with scaled skin, others with luminescent markings, all wearing collars like the one Sera had been forced to wear. She gasped, tears gathering in her eyes. "We can't leave them," she said, voice trembling. Leon felt a pang of agreement. They'd come this far, risked everything. If they left these souls behind, how could they live with themselves? The corridor exploded with activity as more guards appeared behind them. Sera pressed herself to a control panel, searching for a release mechanism. Leon grabbed a half-charged pistol from a guard's holster. The guard lying on the floor, stunned by one of Sera's earlier empathic bursts, and used it to return fire. The hallway became a war zone. Sparks showered from shattered lights. Bolts sizzled in the air, and acrid smoke stung their lungs. "Hurry, Sera!" Leon yelled, flinching as a bolt ricocheted off the wall. She concentrated, tapping into her empathic sense. A swirl of glowing energy emanated from her fingertips as she interfaced with the panel, bypassing the security protocols. The cell doors hissed open one by one, releasing the downtrodden captives. They stumbled out, confused, some half-starved. A tall, reptilian being with shimmering scales blinked, hissing in alarm at the chaotic scene. Another captive, a pale being with large eyes and delicate antennae, trembled. "Freedom," Sera whispered to them, voice thick with emotion. "Run. Fight." live. They sensed her intentions through her empathic aura. A flicker of hope lit their exhausted faces. Some, too weak to move quickly, clung to each other. Others, emboldened by desperation, snatched weapons from fallen guards. A rebellion was sparked right there in the corridor. Leon and Sera led them onward, forging a path of resistance through the labyrinthine halls. The crowd of freed aliens grew, unleashing fury upon the guards who had once subjected them to torment. At last, they emerged into a massive atrium, the same lavish floor with drifting holographic curtains and ornate decor, where the unspeakable fine dining took place. Diners screamed at the sight of their monstrous dishes, now liberated and armed, turning on the staff. The aliens roared, hissing or shouting in their various tongues, driving fear into the hearts of the once complacent elite. Leon kept Sera close, forging a path toward the turbolift that would take them down to the city's base level. Guards tried to rally, but the chaos spread too quickly. Exotic powers, empathic surges, and raw physical might clashed with stunners and rifles. In the midst of it all, the chef stations were overturned, aristocrats cowered under tables, and centuries of cultivated arrogance gave way to panic. They reached the turbolift, battered but unbowed. Sera mashed the control panel, and the door slid open. A final squad of guards appeared at the far end of the atrium, led by Chancellor Arcturus himself, his face twisted in rage. "Stop them!" Arcturus roared, brandishing a sleek sidearm that glowed with ominous power. He fired off a bolt that grazed Leon's side, making him stagger. Leon bit back a cry, pain lancing through him. Sera gasped, feeling his agony echo in her mind. Leon raised his pistol, returning a flurry of shots. Arcturus took cover, but not before one bolt seared across his shoulder, forcing him to drop his weapon with a snarl. Freed captives surged between Arcturus and the turbolift, cutting off his line of attack. "Go!" one of the reptilian aliens hissed, waving Leon and Sera into the lift. "We'll hold them." Leon nodded his gratitude, half collapsing into the lift. Sera cradled him, pressing her hand to the wound, and he felt a wave of soothing warmth dulling the pain. The last thing he saw as the door slid shut was the swirl of rebellion tearing through the opulent atrium, the screams of the haughty diners drowning under the righteous fury of the liberated. The turbolift descended rapidly. Leon leaned against the wall, chest heaving. Sera pressed close, tears of relief staining her cheeks. In that silent ride down, with the city lights rushing past the transparent panel, they realized something monumental had just been unleashed. They reached ground level, the doors sliding open to reveal the labyrinth of Nova Epsilon's undercity. Sirens wailed outside, perhaps the city's general alert in response to the uproar. Smoke plumes rose from distant vantage points. It seemed word was spreading fast. Freed aliens would be fleeing, and the unscrupulous behavior of the elite would soon be laid bare, especially if Leon managed to disseminate the incriminating data. He staggered onto the neon-lit streets, Sera supporting him. Gawkers stared. Some recognized Leon Drake. Others stepped forward to offer fleeting sympathy. Amid the swirling mass of humanity, Leon and Sera found a quiet side alley, where he leaned against a graffiti-covered wall, coughing through the pain. She gently touched his wound, letting her empathic aura wash over him. Though not a trained healer, the emotional support alleviated his suffering, at least for the moment. Leon grimaced. "We need a medic." Sera nodded, glancing around. "And we must share what we have, this data. Let the galaxy see who the Celestial Consortium really is." A stirring of purpose rose in Leon's chest. He had spent too many years drowning in regret, drifting through life. But now, with Sera's unwavering gaze on him, he felt a spark of resolve. "We'll do it," he said, voice rough. "We'll find someone we can trust to broadcast this. And we'll shut them down for good." Over the next few days, the Undercity buzzed with rumors and revelations. Leon, with Sera at his side, found allies among the rebellious elements who had long chafed under the consortium's tyranny. Hackers, journalists, and whistleblowers joined forces, drawn by the explosive evidence captured on Leon's portable drive. For a while, they hid in the old catacombs beneath the city, a place where broken androids and abandoned technology rusted away. By flickering torchlight and the occasional stolen power supply, Leon's new allies combed through the data, exposing the hideous extent of the consortium's interstellar trafficking. Videos, shipping logs, secret deals with government officials, enough to topple not just Arcturus, but every aristocrat who had indulged in the foul feasts. Meanwhile, the freed aliens banded together, caring for each other, supporting the weak. Sera worked tirelessly to console them, her empathic gifts bringing a measure of peace to those scarred by captivity. In turn, their gratitude bolstered her spirits. The Undercity came alive with stories of courage and unity, as more people, human and otherwise, rose up, determined to eradicate the monstrous practices. The Celestial Consortium struck back, unleashing security forces, bribing city officials to clamp down on the rebellious pockets. But the tide had turned. Civilians no longer turned a blind eye. The horror was too real. Holoscreens across the city displayed shocking footage of the so-called delicacies that had once been disguised as mere rumors. Arcturus's veneer of respectability crumbled. High above, in the spire that had once symbolized unchecked luxury, sporadic battles flared. Freed prisoners and outraged citizens took the fight to the opulent corridors, determined to rescue any who remained in captivity. The Celestial Consortium's share prices plummeted. The aristocrats who had grown fat on cruelty fled or tried to broker desperate deals. Some turned on each other, seeking scapegoats. And through it all, Leon Drake limped forward, supported by Sera's gentle presence, his wound slowly healing. Word of his stand against the consortium spread. Once, he had been an infamous bounty hunter, haunted by guilt. Now, he became a symbol of redemption in the eyes of the Undercity, a man who risked his life for a vulnerable being who had been served to him on a platter. At a makeshift broadcast station deep in the labyrinth, Leon and a group of determined journalists prepared to send the final data drop across the HoloNet, ensuring that the entire galaxy would learn the truth. Sera stood by the console, her green skin luminous under the flickering lights, her expression resolute despite the emotional toll. Leon placed a hand on her shoulder. "You ready?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Yes. No more secrets, no more victims." He glanced at the hacker leader, a wiry woman with a prosthetic eye named Marinal. She gave a thumbs up. "We're live in 3, 2, 1. A hum filled the bunker as the broadcast tower activated. Streams of data, along with testimonies from survivors, soared into the digital realm. Holoscreens around the city flickered to life with shocking images and revelations. Outside, in every corner of Nova Epsilon, people paused to watch in horror, then in anger. The hush that fell over the city was swiftly replaced by roars of outrage. Within hours, the city's government, spurred by public fury, declared martial law on the consortium's holdings. Arcturus and his cronies found themselves besieged by their own city. Citizens stormed those once exclusive halls, overturning the gilded illusions of moral superiority. Freed aliens joined the throngs, forging bonds of solidarity. Sera watched it unfold through a battered viewport in the bunker, tears glistening. She felt the wave of collective relief, defiance, and hope flooding Nova Epsilon. Leon slipped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close, a soft warmth between them. "Look at them," she whispered, voice trembling with mingled awe and sadness. "They're all rising up. Not just for me, but for so many." Leon inclined his head. "You gave them a reason to fight," he said, voice husky. "They saw what they'd been ignoring. And now there's no turning back." Days turned into weeks as the city reeled from the upheaval. Arcturus was apprehended, dragged out from a hidden corporate vault, ranting that he would return. The galaxy watched as the once impenetrable Celestial Consortium fell under investigation. Allied worlds, disturbed by the evidence, severed ties. Officials who had been complicit were arrested. Freed captives stood as witnesses, sharing harrowing truths that no one could deny. Leon and Sera found themselves at the forefront of a broader movement. People from all walks of life reached out, offering them protection, resources, or heartfelt thanks. The Undercity, once a place of shadows, now vibrated with a sense of possibility. Meanwhile, the rescued aliens began forging new paths. Some planned to return to their homeworlds, though their scattered families would take time to reunite. Others stayed in Nova Epsilon, determined to shape a fairer society. Amid the heartbreak of the revelations, Something bright had taken root, a sense of unity transcending species or class. Leon, ever practical, arranged a safe haven for Sera in a quiet district outside the city's main thoroughfares. A modest apartment, away from the neon glare, where the sky was just a little darker and the hum of traffic less intrusive. There, she could recover from the trauma. On a crisp evening, Leon stepped onto the apartment's small balcony, gazing at the distant lights of Nova Epsilon's skyline. The spire still rose, but now it was under new management, temporary officials tasked with cleaning up the rot. He heard soft footsteps behind him. Sera approached, wearing simple clothes that covered her emerald skin in gentle folds, her face partly illuminated by the city glow. Leon offered a slight smile. "How are you holding up?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then returned the smile, though her eyes remained sad. "Better. It's quieter now that I'm not surrounded by so much fear and anger. The city feels calmer." She paused, tilting her head. "And you? Your shoulder?" Leon rolled it experimentally. The pain had lessened, reduced to a dull ache. "Still sore, but I'll live." They stood side by side in comfortable silence, the faint wind carrying the distant hum of hover traffic. An unspoken bond had formed between them, forged in peril, sealed by shared purpose. "Leon," she said, voice delicate, "I know your past pains you. Even when I try not to peer into it, I can feel your regrets." He exhaled. "I did things I'm not proud of, Sera. Hurt people, caught fugitives for credits without caring about the bigger picture. But maybe this, helping expose the consortium, maybe it's a start toward making amends." She laid a gentle hand on his arm. "Redemption is a path, not a destination," she whispered, echoing some wise phrase from her distant home. "You've already taken the first steps." He turned to her, the lines of his face softened by gratitude. "Couldn't have done it without you," he said quietly. She met his gaze, and in that moment, the empathic connection between them felt warm, enveloping. A flicker of a smile curved her lips. "Then we'll walk forward together." Days later, the official inquiry began, with Leon and Sera as central witnesses. They stood before a council, sharing the harrowing details of what they had found. Countless officials who once sneered at the Undercity now bowed their heads in shame or cowered in fear of being implicated. Sera spoke on behalf of her people, her voice unwavering, recounting their anguish under captivity. The data gleaned from the consortium's own files validated every word. When the judgments fell, they came like thunder. The Celestial Consortium was dismantled. Arcturus faced a lifetime of imprisonment, his assets seized to compensate the victims. Other complicit figures were dragged into the harsh light of justice. Although not every corrupt official was caught, the wave of reforms that swept Nova Epsilon was undeniable. Out among the stars, the shockwaves rippled. Laws tightened around interstellar trafficking, new treaties drafted. Plans were set in motion to free any remaining captives, to trace the scattered or displaced. Within weeks, small outposts and hidden labs linked to the consortium were exposed and shut down. Each triumph was a step toward a galaxy a little less indifferent. One evening, under the newly restored neon lights that pulsed with a more hopeful beat, Leon and Sera found themselves in a humble gathering on a platform overlooking the city. Friends and allies came together to honor the freed beings. Journalists, hackers, and ex-prisoners mingled in an atmosphere of celebration. Soft music drifted through the air, not the pretentious orchestras of the spire, but the lively tunes of the Undercity's heart. Leon watched from the side, arms crossed, a rare smile tugging at his lips. He spotted the tall reptilian alien dancing awkwardly with a group of humans, both sides trying to coordinate steps. Nearby, the pale being with antennae offered a gentle laugh as it sampled a simple street vendor's treat. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Sera said, drifting to his side. She wore a modest yet elegant wrap that swayed lightly in the breeze, her emerald skin glowing under the lights. All these people, finally free, celebrating together. He nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. For so long, he'd been trapped in a spiral of self-loathing, living as though every day was a punishment. But seeing these beings reclaim their lives reminded him that hope could sprout in the darkest places. She took his hand, and together they walked among the revelers. They shared quiet words of encouragement with the survivors, accepted hugs, felt the tide of grateful emotions swirl around them. In the distance, fireworks burst above the spire, their shimmering lights mirrored in the reflective windows. A city once mired in the shadows of decadence now strove, however imperfectly, to become something better. As the night deepened, the crowd dispersed, many departing to find new beginnings. Leon and Sera remained on the platform, gazing at the cosmos overhead. The hustle of hovercrafts and speeders flickered below, but up here, a calm hush prevailed. Leon turned to her, chest tight with a softness he rarely allowed himself. "What will you do now?" he asked, knowing she had her own dreams, her own path. Sera lowered her gaze. "I want to help my people," she said, voice tremulous. "Find those still missing. Rebuild what was lost. But I don't wish to leave you behind, Leon. Not after." She trailed off, uncertain how to phrase the bond they'd formed through adversity. His heart thudded. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then let's do it together," he whispered. "I'm done running from my past. I want to build something worth protecting." Her eyes lit with relief and delight, a surge of warmth radiating from her empathic center. "Yes," she breathed. Together, they embraced, the city's glow dancing across their forms. And in that embrace, Leon felt not just the resolution of an old vendetta, but the stirring of a new chapter. One where he was not merely an ex-bounty hunter drowning in whiskey, but a man with a cause, a purpose, and someone to stand beside him. In the weeks and months that followed, their partnership blossomed. When a wave of newly gathered intelligence suggested there were still hidden enclaves of the consortium lurking on remote planets, Leon and Sera set out together to track them down. Alongside volunteers from Nova Epsilon, they formed a small coalition that traveled between star systems, rescuing the lost, unveiling the truth wherever it was buried. Their missions ranged from stealthy infiltrations of black market auctions to bold raids on uncharted bases. Sera's empathic abilities proved invaluable, allowing them to sense the suffering of captives or unravel the manipulations of unscrupulous traders. Leon's bounty hunting experience provided the strategic edge they needed to outmaneuver dangerous foes. Time and again, they risked everything, forging alliances with local rebels and shining a light into corners of the galaxy that had never known justice. Yet through the chaos and the danger, there was solace in their connection. Each time they returned to Nova Epsilon, now governed by a reformed council, they felt a sense of coming home. Their modest apartment remained a sanctuary, a place to rest, heal, and plan. The city continued to reinvent itself, scarred but determined to prove that redemption was possible. The Spire, once a testament to oppression, now housed research labs dedicated to cultural exchange and interspecies cooperation. Life was not without its trials, of course. The wounds ran deep. Survivors grappled with nightmares, and the memory of the Spire's lavish cruelties cast a long shadow. But with each small victory, with each captive freed, with each monstrous profiteer brought to justice, hope thrived. And in time, hope became stronger than fear. On the anniversary of their great upheaval, a celebration took place in the heart of Nova Epsilon. No longer called the Festival of Indulgence, it was renamed the Festival of Unity, commemorating the day that the oppressed stood up and the truth shattered gilded lies. Lanterns filled the sky, painting the darkness with delicate patterns of light. Music echoed through the streets, not forced or extravagant, but joyful and heartfelt. Leon Drake and Sera stood on a platform amid a cheering crowd, recognized as catalysts for the city's transformation. They exchanged a smile. Though Leon never relished the spotlight, seeing the gratitude in the eyes of the people and the radiant grin on Sera's face made it bearable. In a short speech, Leon cleared his throat, feeling unaccustomed nervousness. "I'm no hero," he said, voice echoing over the throng. "Just a man who saw something wrong and couldn't ignore it. Sera showed me what compassion really means, what it can cost, and what it can achieve. If there's any lesson here, it's that none of us has to be alone. We can stand together, fight together, and find a future that's worth living for." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sera, stepping forward, addressed them in a calm, resonant voice. "This city taught me fear," she said. "Then it taught me hope. My people are scattered among the stars, but they will know we are not forgotten. We fight for each other, And for every voice still silenced by tyranny, know that we carry a promise. You are seen, you are heard, and you will be free. Thunderous applause swept through the streets. Fireworks soared into the sky. The festival continued late into the night, a testament to a world reborn. Even those who had once feasted on illusions of superiority now humbled themselves, seeking ways to atone. When the festivities slowed in the small hours of the morning, Leon and Sera slipped away from the crowds, hand in hand, making their way to a quiet overlook. The shimmering spires of Nova Epsilon stretched below them, a tapestry of light and shadow. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her waist. "Are you happy?" he murmured. She smiled, a glow in her eyes. "I'm free, and I have you by my side." "Yes, Leon, I am happy." He rested his cheek against her hair, inhaling the subtle scent that was uniquely hers, feeling the gentle thrum of her empathic aura. Family, he thought, a concept he once believed forever lost to him. But the bond they shared was deeper than blood. It was forged in rescue, in trust, in standing together when all seemed lost. Below, a final burst of fireworks illuminated the skyline. In that moment, time seemed to stretch, the sparkling lights reflecting a future bright with promise. This was not the end of their journey, far from it. They would carry on, traveling between stars, righting wrongs, reuniting those torn apart. But for tonight, they let themselves bask in the peace they had earned, a peace that glimmered with the contentment of a happy ending to one chapter and the hopeful beginning of countless more. Leon Drake closed his eyes, the faint echo of cheers drifting on the wind. He felt the steady presence of Sera by his side, her fingers interlaced with his, her heart beating in sync. Together, they had turned a night of horrors into the dawn of a new legacy. Far off, the cosmos stretched endlessly, sparkling with hidden wonders and lurking shadows alike. But in that vast unknown, they were no longer alone, no longer powerless. And as they stood on that precipice, they felt a quiet certainty whispering through the starlight. Whatever came next, they would face it together, bound by hope, guided by empathy, and forever changed by a single act of defiance that set an entire world free.